We are the Keyboard Samurai, a podcast focused on sharing insights to help those working in cybersecurity companies, be them technology or services. Each session, your host, Will Klusovsky, aka Will Clue, sits down with professionals in our industry to illuminate topics that will help your security biz, team, or self be better. Let's hack into it now. Hey everybody, welcome. So today we've got Chris with us, another CEO and founder. So becoming a theme here for the show. So Chris, I'll give you 20, 30 seconds. You want to introduce yourself, who you are and why we care?
I don't know why you care, but I'm Chris Hadnagy. I'm the CEO of Social Engineer LLC and also the Innocent Lives Foundation and the Institute for Social Engineering.
That's outstanding. So we chatted a little bit before. Like I said, there's a couple of things that you do that I'm super interested in. The first is the fact that you're in a cybersecurity services business, and two, you just specialize on social engineering, right? Yeah. So I guess just looking at things from the services perspective alone, just starting that type of an organization, like what are some of the hardest things that you had to deal with?
So I started this in 2010, if you can believe that. And I remember the day I came home, had a good job, told my wife, I want to start a company that does just social engineering and I want to do services and training. And she goes, okay, how many people do it and how much do they make? I said, well, no one else is doing it. I can't answer question number two. And, we talked about it and we eventually said, okay, let's try. So my first challenge was just getting companies to see that this was a viable service, that they needed it, that it wasn't a nice to have, it was a must have. And then the second is, and this was a big one, was can we do the job that the bad guys do, but remain ethical and moral? And can we not use pretexts that elicit fear and anger and still be successful? Because at the end of the day, yeah, the bad guys might, use your nudes against you, or might threaten to fire you, or might threaten to hack your computer, but they're not looking to train you when you're done. I want you to be trainable. So if I embarrass you, humiliate you, hurt you, you're not going to want to learn anything from me. So I have to leave your brain open to the idea of being trained by using pretexts that don't elicit those emotions. And that was much more difficult than selling the service, believe it or not.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, that's super interesting. I never thought about that. As somebody who's a big proponent of in-person training, like my master's thesis was actually about like the human element, and a big part of that is, CBTs aren't enough. You've got to put a person in front of them that they can have conversations with. I mean, even now, like one of the clients I'm working with now, I'm meeting with each business unit individually to talk about security, right? Like that face-to-face time, like really helps it nail down, like it makes it relatable to them. But that idea of like not embarrassing them. So to go down that rabbit hole a bit, so like what are some of the things that you can kind of do that like how do you do that then, I guess?
Yeah. So let's say we have a service we call callback phishing, and we developed it after we saw Russia using this as threat actors. So we send a phishing email from a domain that we buy that looks very similar to our client. And we say, hey, this is tech support. Your computer's got an error on it. Here's your service tag number. We need you to call this toll-free number to get help. And we set up a call center. So if they call into that call center, my vishers are sitting there waiting. And when they call in, we'll ask questions like, oh, what kind of computer do you have? And, we can give you the instructions. It will take you about 2 hours. But if you want me to do it, I can do it. I just need your password. So, and then, we get their password and things like that, or we'll ask them for their employee ID or their social security number to verify their account. We do all these things that, again, they're never getting threatened to being fired. We're not saying, oh, your account's been hacked and everything's bad. We're not telling them that the boss is ticked off and, those kinds of things. So we just use pretext that will elicit that curiosity, and we hope it will make them think enough to shut us down. But, as we see, we have a wide success ratio.
Yeah. And it's interesting how, I mean, those are the same sort of attack vector, same patterns that we talk to people about, like eliciting emotion. Yep. Hey, I'm just like the big ones. Hey, it's Friday afternoon. I just want to go home too, buddy.
Yeah.
Like let's
use that all the time.
Right. Yeah. So in that aspect, talk a little bit like with you doing live training, like how important is that live person to person stuff? Where does that kind of break and become more different and more valuable than kind of just the, you know, the typical stuff that most people are probably doing today?
Yeah, so I'll come at it from two angles. First, let's talk about like the training, like vishing stuff and things like that. Using an automated system, a robo dialer. I mean, have you ever got a call from a robo dialer and went, "Oh, I should probably play
Yeah.
along and press buttons"? Nobody does that. So if you're not testing people in the way they're really going to be attacked, it's kind of like going to a fake martial arts class, right? Like, you know, like just use the power and you can hit people. You know, it's not real. You want to go to a real class, learn the real thing. But then also from the full training perspective, like getting other people to be social engineers. When COVID happened, I tried my hardest to bring my courses, my 3 or 4 courses I have, to online. And it is just so hard to talk about using influence, body language, nonverbals, facial expressions over this medium.
Yeah.
Being in person and being personal with it is what makes the difference. When someone can see it, touch it, feel it, actually ask questions, see what's bad and what's good, it makes all the difference in the world in getting them to accept that training.
Yeah, that resonates a lot, like with the, you know, I've worked remote most of my career. Like I'm not a big you need to be in the office guy.
Yep.
Like I'm actually anti that. But you know, there's times even on my, like if I've got to go meet with a CISO and I need to spend 4 hours with them in a room with a whiteboard, that's way more. First off,
Yeah.
you can't spend 4 hours like this. Like
People
everybody's
stop
gonna
paying
get burned
attention.
out. Yeah.
Yeah, they stop paying attention. I'm with you 100%. My whole company's remote. We don't have an office, right? So all my employees, they're all around the US and they all work from home. But when we're going to do a corporate event or corporate training and we're going to spend 8 hours together, we fly them all into one location. And that's what we do, because there's absolutely no way I expect my people to sit on Zoom for 8 hours and pay attention. You know,
For
I
sure.
can't do it. I'll start checking email or playing with my phone or something else, you know?
Yeah, that and you, yeah, it's interesting too, because I guess it says a lot about the clients you have, or just anybody else, I guess, thinking about whether they're going to, you know, build and sell a similar service, or whether or not they're going to consume the service. But like that importance of um, checking the box versus doing it for real. Like you said, if you're going to get a bunch of robo dials or robo texts and nobody's actually going to respond to it, you'll get a false sense of security. I think everybody, I mean, at this point, the email phishing side of the house has gotten pretty, it's good. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, guys like you and
It's
I,
never going to be perfect, but it's
right?
good.
But I mean, it does what it's supposed to, and
Yeah.
but to actually get around the pretexting side of things, I think it's important to have those people. So what's the, in that aspect of things with that live sort of side of the house, like what's the most interesting, fun, like what's the,
Eh,
like what you gotta have a cool story on being able to
Oh,
focus just around social engineering,
I
right?
mean, tons of cool stories. So I'll give you one from fishing. So when I remember when I started this, I was really focused just on fishing. That was the big problem. Then I had a client say, "Well, what about vishing? You know, voice phishing. What do you do for that?" And I said, "Well, you know, we do make vishing calls, and I'm making vishing calls for this large client. I'm using like what everyone else is using, these online spoof things, and I get someone to give me a password. And I'm like, holy crap, that password is now sitting on some server, probably in China." And I'm like, I gotta figure other things
Yeah.
out. So I kind of stepped back and I had to create my own VoIP server that allows for spoofing and recording, and then host it on my own network, because I can't have client data. We're working with some of the world's largest banks, government agencies, healthcare. Like I can't have their passwords sitting on something else. So we had to create all of that, and that was all new. And then I had to find humans that were willing to literally sit on the phone for a day and lie to people and get their stuff, and but realize they're doing it for a good reason, because it still bothers your conscience if you're a moral person, right? um and that was hard. So I think, like when you say, when you asked the question, what about people trying to duplicate that? I keep waiting. I do.
Mhm.
And I know I have some large clients that did. They said, okay, we're going to bring this in house. And a year or two later, they come back and they're like, nobody wants to do this. Like, we can't pay people to do this. And I'm like, because it's hard. You know,
Yeah.
like we have a lot of mental health breaks. We came up with programs to keep people healthy and, you know, like this. So you can't just take a normal a tech guy and say, hey, sit on the phone for 8 hours making vishing calls, you
Yeah.
know?
That's super interesting. And I experienced that too in my past, where, and I've sold and scoped a lot of pen tests. And you know, we always have, you know, let full life cycle. You need to understand, like if you're gonna really want to know, then we all attack vectors are open. And that it means every time we're gonna do phishing, USB drops, all of that stuff. but we have a few hundred employees, and the number of employees who are going to get on the phone and be able to lie, or even work, or even harder, go in person and put on the fake UPS outfit, and like, you have to kind of be an actor, right? I mean, and understand what you're trying to accomplish, and that is not that's probably just as hard of a skill as application security, right?
I think harder at some point, because like we got this job once for it was just recently, we got this job for like a water, it was a government agency, and they wanted their water plant and their water treatment plant tested because they had some potential terror threats. So they were like, could you literally break in during the daytime, we call that SE teaming, and then at nighttime red teaming, and gain access to the water tank and simulate, not of course do it, but then you could have dropped poison and killed everyone in the town. Could you have gotten inside the water treatment plant and put all the waste in the river right there, causing billions of dollars of legal damage and natural damage? So we're like, okay, we can do that. So I pick my team. I have a young lady that works for me and another guy, and we go on site, and we take our first day, and we do like a scope. We're driving around. Now this plant, we're like, it's lit up at night, like Yankee Stadium. I'm like, there's no way we're climbing over this barbed wire fence in broad daylight, right? And even at night, it was like broad. That's how bright it was. I'm like, we're gonna get seen. So I'm like, okay, what do we do? So we're driving around the back of this, and we're across the river looking at this place, and there's one section of fence that comes right up to almost to the river, and all the lights are broke, and it's completely dark. And I'm like, I look at Shelby, and she's like, oh no, you're gonna make us swim across the river, aren't you? I'm like, yeah, we're swimming across the river. So I'm the tallest guy there, so I'm carrying the ladder on my head. She's got all the shoes. The other guy's got the bag of tools, and we swim across this river. We get the ladder up against the fence. We put towels and mats over the barbed wire. We're soaking wet. We hop over the fence, and now we're in this place, and we're roaming free for an hour, and we're out there, never got caught. And now we're like, okay, we got to get back out. So we got to go out the same way we came. So same thing, we're climb back over, swim across the river with the ladder and all the stuff. And it's like, we come back and tell them, this is what happened. Like, what the heck? Like they can't, they're like, who would have thought about doing that? And I'm like, well, that's your weak spot.
Yeah.
Right. You have all the security in the front. You had cameras, you had lights, you had everything, you had security there. That's great. But that one area, the light was broken. Nobody fixed it. The fence is lower because it's right next to the river,
that persistent, that whole, and for that organization, that's good, because like, critical infrastructure, that type, anti-terrorism stuff, that's where you're going to get people who really are dedicated to accomplishing their mission. So they'll do everything. Super interesting. Well, and now, I mean, depending, you could just kind of get close by and remotely do it with OT hacking, right? So
if you could with some of the controls, you definitely can.
Yeah, I've seen one of my recent jobs, we had a simulated like what inside one of those water towers, and how you could kind of turn off the safety things and watch all that stuff. To me is fascinating, but there's not a lot of people exploiting that, but it's out there for sure. So, well, so kind of going back to like just selling and just doing this social engineering aspect of things versus like, do you I'm curious as to how you find your clients and kind of how you, or is it all inbound because what you do is so unique, or do you have to really kind of bang on the door and let people know why this is important? Because I mean, as somebody who can sell a pen test and include all this scope pretty easily, somebody who's specializing in that, I feel like you've got a special market approach, right?
So that's an interesting question, because I kind of use this analogy when I think of this. Is somebody says, boy, I want a hamburger. Well, you have Gordon Ramsay burgers and you have McDonald's. They're both hamburgers, right? But which one are you looking for? So it's like, this because you're in the industry. Everybody's a social engineer now. So how does the client differentiate between the McDonald's and the Gordon Ramsay, right? And I'm not saying we're the only Gordon Ramsay. There's a lot of great people out there. So I think that's the first hard part. So you kind of have to tackle that. And the way we have done it is by getting all my people to write books and articles, getting them out there, giving speeches, being thought leaders. And even though I hate that phrase, but being thought leaders in the space, making sure our voices are being heard on LinkedIn and other platforms, making sure that we're ahead of it. Like I hire specifically, I have a young woman, she has a PhD, and her PhD is in understanding human decision making. And we hired her for the sole purpose of bringing science into our team. Because I remember this is another story. So going back many years, I had this job, successful as heck. The boss says to me, okay, Chris, so you did it. How do I fix it? And I looked at him and I went, I got no clue. And he said, so if I went to my auto mechanic and I said, hey, what's this noise? And he goes, the brakes. And I say, okay, fix it. Because I don't know how. I'd never go to that mechanic again. And I'm like, that's a dang good analogy. And I'm like, that changed my whole view. I'm like, he's right. I'm just doing the cool thing because I felt cool doing it. It was all about me. And I'm like, but now I needed to change my whole business structure. So I'm like, okay, so that was many, many years ago. And then just in the last, I think it's been 3 years, we hired her to bring her aboard and say, now we really want science. So we're doing like some of the coolest things. Like we do 2,500 phishing calls a month, right? That is the volume that we're doing. Every one of our calls, we use at least 1 or 2 principles of influence. So when my people are logging the call, they'll log which principle of influence they used. And then at the end of the year, we're able to take all those phishing calls and say, which principle led to more compromise? Which principle led to more shutdown? And now we're able to go back to the client and say, when females call you, the principle of let's say a social proof works. When men call you, the principle of authority works. Like we need to work on education around that, right? And we're able to now develop science and help them really fix the problem.
That's outstanding. I love that. Like, yeah, get to the root cause and then find. It's like you said, it's the same thing as managing any other risk. Figure out where the most risk is and address that. And now you get to address that through live training, right? Or additional training or additional programs, education, which makes a lot of sense. I have to also commend you on the thought leader, so I don't mind thought leader. It's influencer I don't like.
Oh, yeah, me too. Me too.
and there's
I just hate labeling myself as that,
right?
you know.
Yeah,
but,
and there's lots of us. Like I've had these calls with lots of people who have way more hundreds of thousands of followers than I do, and even they're like, "Don't say that word," right?
Yeah.
But
like I don't want to influence anybody in that way.
But it is super important that, like, as a business, your people have their own identity, their own brand, and they get out there and are able to, bring you business, because and that's why I do what I do most of the time. Like, if you see me somewhere and you're like, hey, that's a smart guy, I want to go buy stuff from them. I mean, that's the same thing you do with your people, because platforms like LinkedIn, all social media, it's useless to just use it as an advertising platform. Nobody reads it.
Yeah.
Right.
I have people say to me, other CEOs, well, aren't you afraid that, you're building them up and someone's going to snipe them? Someone's going to take them. I'm like, that's always a risk.
Yeah.
It's always a risk that someone, but I'm like, I think that if you give them an amazing place to work, you empower them, people come to me and they say, I want to retire here at this company. Right. One of my employees just told me that yesterday, and that was like, wow, that's touching, like
that's outstanding.
You're only in your 30s. Like, what the heck? Like, we got a lot more years together then. Right. But when you do that, they're not out there looking. Someone may come with more money, but they're like, okay, tell me how you treat your people, or tell me what they look at that company. Nobody's online doing anything. It's just the boss. So I think, going back to that one question you asked, that's one of our sales methods. As I get my people giving speeches, writing articles, doing things on social media, so they see that the company is a powerhouse as a company. It's not based on one guy, right? So it's based on the powerhouse that everyone here is dedicated to this craft. They all want to be excellent at it. And then, second is I don't want to ever build a market by cutting down competition. So we do a lot of things, like when we had a client that was using us for phishing for years, and they came and they said, oh, we're gonna go a different route this year. And I went, okay. I said, well, I'm going to mail you something. And I mailed them my book I wrote on how to conduct a phishing program. I figured, if anything, they can help. This is what I was using. This can help you with your next vendor. They came back a year later and said, that failed miserably. Will you take us back? I'm like, I will, but we've had price increases. I'm sorry, so, and it wasn't a punishment. It's just the way it goes, and that happens because I think when you treat people like your clients nicely, because the thing is, we are not, if you're looking for a price comparison, we're not the cheapest. We're really not, I was when I started, but we're not the cheapest. So we are expensive because I certify everyone, has to go through my training class and pass a certification if they're going to do the work. And we have a very high level of moral and ethics in the stuff that we do. So if anyone breaks that, they're gone. right? We just don't. So we don't keep that. So to keep those kind of people and that caliber of people, it's not cheap.
Yeah.
So we charge commensurately. So a lot of it is inbound. I feel like what happens is everyone's sitting in the boardroom and the CEO goes, "Hey Bob, what's this phishing thing?" And Bob says, "Oh, it's a phone call, phishing. Find us someone to fix it."
Yeah.
So Bob goes on the internet and he's like, "Phishing,
LinkedIn, phishing, social engineering. Oh, look, Chris.
And our name comes up. Yeah. I mean, I've owned social-engineer.com and social-engineer.org and socialengineer.org since 2008. Right. So you can't type those words into any search engine without my name coming up. So that also helps. So we do have outbound. We have we have a sales team, and we have our social media marketing team. But I would say, I mean, sales is great at closing, but I mean, I don't think anyone's ever bought anything from Instagram from us. You know what I mean? So that's more brand awareness. So we do it, but we don't.
There's demand gen and then there's lead gen, and it's again, I go back to what you were saying about those individuals creating their brand. Like, nobody is going to call. I doubt. Maybe there's some people listening to this, but nobody's going to call that person who has the same company background as everybody else in your company because you made them change their LinkedIn profile and they all look the same and they don't have any thoughts of their own. At least that's the way it looks, right? That whole idea that like your profile is your company's, no, it's yours as a person, right? And again, to your point, they're they're not going to want to leave because they're not going to want to go to that kind of company, right? They're going to want to stay there and work for you. So I love that. I like the go ahead. You saying something?
No, it works perfect because like that young woman I was telling about, Abby, that has the PhD. She wrote a book on managing shame. Nothing to do with social engineering, right? Then she gives a TED talk on that book. So now she's got some fame, and now a legal team in Ireland calls our company and hires her as an expert witness because of that, right? So I wasn't like, no, you can't write about anything but social engineering. No, you have to. It has to be owned by the company. You have to make sure the company's mentioned. It's just do your thing, because now that thing led to us getting hired for this very high profile case, and she's an expert witness.
Yeah.
So that's going to lead to other types of work, right? Because of that. So please build your brand.
Yeah, it's a huge advantage for companies. They really need to do it and take some time to, like, I've been fortunate. A couple companies I had brought in people who like, tell you how to utilize social media, and there's pluses and minuses to all that. But even then, like, as somebody at the time who was kind of thought I had the LinkedIn thing figured out for the most part, like I still learned some new things from that environment, from that education. Just a couple of hours chatting with somebody to be like, hey, here's how you can use this, and here's the way people respond. Because a lot of us think we understand it, but the reality is, like, the actual inner workings are really, really weird sometimes. And to that same point about how it kind of goes to the same point you had about, you've got all this data now, so you can say, well, here's the things that happen when a man calls, when a woman calls. Here's the type of stuff. There's certain bits of data those types of people have on social media interactions that, like, we don't have exposure to if you're not really digging into it. Like, the one thing I found out that was really interesting, I think everybody's learned by now, this was years ago, is once you have a couple of connections in common and you have at least 500 total connections, you don't have to send a note. You know what I mean? You just say connect now. And I was like, oh, wow. I was sitting here tailoring everyone, hoping I was talking them into connecting to me like it was going to be a worthwhile venture. It's like, no, just send the connection.
I know.
Things like that.
Yeah. I'm not a huge fan of social media, but LinkedIn is one I spend a lot of time on. I mean, I've got a lot of good business contacts on that.
Yeah, we have to, I think, in our industry, for the most part. I mean, there's also nowhere else to go. I mean, well, kind of, like you said, there you can, how much business are you going to sell on Instagram?
And I'm sorry, I'm not jumping on TikTok. It's just not happening.
Interestingly enough, I will admit, so Josh Braun is somebody I talk about a lot. We talk about, like, treating customers that properly, and in our business, a lot of it is educating them as to why. It's not you have to do this because it's the best way to do it. It's because if you want to get this kind of impact, this is the kind of what you have to put forward, is just education. He talks a lot about that. But I did find him on TikTok because I have a lot of, like, marketing and
if it works for him, man, I would love to know a cyber person that it's working for them, and then see what they're doing.
I haven't seen too many cyber people in there. I've seen mostly because, like, LinkedIn is my work world. And when I'm kind of on the other stuff, I don't want to see that.
Yeah, right. I'm with you.
Like my
I'm with
Google feed, if it recommends like the new NIST stuff, I'm like, no, I don't like, I need to go and, actually go look for that. I don't want it to pop up on a feed.
Right. I hear you.
Well, Chris, that was awesome. Obviously we can find you on LinkedIn. What's your shortcut there?
I think it's just Chris Hadnagy, or is it Christopher? Let me take a look real quick, and I can tell you.
Sure. And then anywhere else
it's
we can
Christopher
find you on the
Hadnagy.
interwebs?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the website has got all of our social media on it, so social-engineer.com. You can find everything on there. But LinkedIn's probably the best. It's the one I check the most, and it's the one I answer the most. I'm rarely on Twitter or X nowadays. It just kind of went downhill.
I think it's going away. Well, not going away, but it's,
It used to be really popular and fun, and now it just feels like bots and disinformation. So I kind of avoid it. But yeah, I'm mostly on LinkedIn for that, or my website, a direct email. I always try to answer when people email.
Got it. Great. Sounds great. Well, maybe we'll chat again soon. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks.
See ya.
Thanks for enjoying Keyboard Samurai Podcast. If you'd like to engage, find Will on LinkedIn at /WillClue or visit at willclue.me. That's WILKLU.me for more info. Disconnecting now. Synac you later.